In 2014, Facebook secretly altered 700,000 users' feeds to study emotional contagion. Published without consent, this caused global outrage. Was it innovation or violation? Welcome to our session on ethics in research. Today, we'll explore how ethical principles shape what we can and cannot do in research. Remember, modern ethics emerged from historical failures. Interesting fact, the principle of voluntary consent was only codified after World War II atrocities. Quick poll, would you be upset if your social media feed was manipulated? Whenever we talk about research ethics, you should consider how you would feel if you were in a study. Throughout the semester, I will ask the question, why does it matter? In this case, I think it's pretty easy. Research can harm without touching people physically. Ethics matters because research can harm people mentally, physically, or emotionally. Researchers have not only a humanistic obligation to care for those who participate in their research, but also a scientific obligation to uncover information that benefits society. For example, the Tuskegee syphilis study, conducted between 1932 and 1972, involved men who were left untreated without consent. This scandal shocked the world and led directly to U.S. regulations on research ethics. Maybe the only good that came out of this study is that it led to the National Research Act, 1974, which launched an aggressive campaign to ensure that people are protected from harm in research. History is rife with disturbing human experiments that continued without much law or policy intervention until after the end of World War II. It was at this time, in 1946, that the first trial involving 23 war criminals from Germany's Third Reich was held. These individuals, 20 of whom were doctors, faced trial for crimes against humanity, which included medical experiments on concentration camp inmates who were tortured and murdered during these experiments. 16 of the 23 defendants were eventually found guilty and received sentences ranging from execution to 10 years imprisonment. The trials, conducted in Nuremberg, Germany, led to the creation of the Nuremberg Code in 1949. The code, a 10-point set of research principles, was designed to guide doctors and scientists who conduct research on human participants. Today, the Nuremberg Code guides medical and other research conducted on human participants, including social scientific research. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram, 1974, conducted a series of experiments designed to understand obedience to authority, in which he tricked participants into believing they were administering an electric shock to other participants. In fact, the shocks were not real at all, but some, though not many, of Milgram's research participants experienced extreme emotional distress after the experiment. The ethical dilemmas in this set of studies include deception. Participants were misled about the true purpose and procedures of the study. Psychological harm. Many experienced extreme stress, anxiety, and guilt during and after the experiment. Informed consent issues. Participants agreed without full knowledge of what would occur. Debriefing concerns. Although Milgram did debrief subjects, critics argued it was insufficient to undo the psychological distress caused. The study remains one of the most famous and controversial examples in social psychology, illustrating the tension between scientific insight and the emotional cost to participants. Laud Humphreys, 1970, collected data for his dissertation research related to the practice of men engaging in anonymous sexual encounters in public restrooms in New York City, known as the tear room trade. To conduct his research, Humphreys offered to serve as a watch queen, the person who keeps an eye out for police, and was then able to watch the sexual encounters in local park washrooms in major metropolitan areas in the United States. What Humphreys did not do was identify himself as a researcher to his research participants. He also wrote down their license plate numbers as they pulled into or out of the parking lot near the restroom. With the help of several insiders who had access to motor vehicle registration information, Humphreys used those license plate numbers to obtain the names and home addresses of his research participants. Then, disguised as a public health researcher, Humphreys visited his participants in their homes and interviewed them about their lives and their health. Once Humphreys' work became public, it created quite a controversy. At his home university, e.g., the chancellor tried to have his degree revoked among sociologists in general and among members of the public, as it raised public concerns about the purpose and conduct of sociological research. The ethical dilemmas in this study include deception and lack of informed consent. Participants did not know they were being studied. Violation of privacy, tracking license plates, and visiting homes invaded participants' private lives. Potential harm. Exposure risked reputational damage, loss of employment, and criminal charges in a time of heavy stigma against homosexuality. Researcher justification. Humphreys argued the behavior occurred in public spaces and that his findings helped fight stereotypes. But critics saw his methods as deeply intrusive. The tear room trade remains one of the most debated cases in sociology, often used to teach about the balance between knowledge gained and the ethical cost to participants. Humphreys defended his research methods, but he also says that he would conduct the second part of his research differently. Rather than trace license numbers and interview unwitting tear room participants in their homes under the guise of public health research, Humphreys instead would spend more time in the field and work to cultivate a pool of informants. Those informants would know that he was a researcher and would be able to fully consent to being interviewed. Finally, in 2014, Facebook researchers, along with academic collaborators, conducted a massive experiment on nearly 700,000 users without their knowledge by manipulating users' news feeds to show more positive or negative posts. The team studied whether emotions could spread online. They found evidence of emotional contagion. Users exposed to more negative content tended to post more negative updates, and vice versa. The study was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, sparking global backlash. The ethical dilemmas here include lack of informed consent. Users were never told they were part of a psychological experiment. Manipulation of behavior. Researchers deliberately altered people's emotional states without permission. Potential harm. The emotional well-being of participants could have been negatively affected, especially for vulnerable users. Corporate versus academic standards. Because it was framed as product testing under Facebook's terms of service. Researchers bypassed traditional IRB review. Critics argued this blurred the line between business practice and scientific research. Transparency and accountability. Publication of the findings raised questions about whether large tech companies should be held to the same ethical standards as universities. This case is now a central example of modern digital-era research dilemmas, highlighting the tension between big data innovation and participant rights in online environments. As read or hear about these and other studies, you want to ask yourself, if I were on a panel reviewing these studies, would I think the advantages of these studies outweigh the potential harm they may cause? The studies we just reviewed and others led to increasing public awareness of and concern for research undertaken on human participants. In 1974, the U.S. Congress enacted the National Research Act, which created the National Commission for the Protection of Human Participants in Biomedical and Behavioral Research. The commission produced the Belmont Report, a document outlining basic ethical principles for research on human participants. The Belmont Report, formalized in 1979, outlined 3 principles: respect for persons, beneficence, doing good and preventing harm, and justice. Interesting fact, it was drafted after the Tuskegee study scandal and is still the cornerstone of U.S. research ethics today. Institutional review boards, or IRBs, are tasked with ensuring that the rights and welfare of human and non-human animal research participants will be protected at all institutions, including universities, hospitals, non-profit research institutions, and other organizations that receive federal support for research. IRBs typically consist of members from a variety of disciplines, such as sociology, economics, education, social work, and communications, to name a few. Most IRBs also include representatives from the community in which they reside. IRBs review research before it starts to protect human and animal participants. Fact: the National Research Act of 1974 required institutions receiving federal funds to have IRBs. In addition to IRBs, a variety of institutions have developed guiding ethical principles for research undertaken with human participants. This slide is based on a Canadian example. These ethical principles include dignity, informed consent, protection for vulnerable populations, privacy, justice, minimizing harm, and maximizing benefit. These principles are international. For example, the Declaration of Helsinki, 1964, expanded these protections globally. To make this information a bit more personal, consider which principle you personally value the most as a social science researcher. Your answer will reflect how you conduct research and how well you will work with review boards like the IRB. We cannot leave this topic without differentiating between anonymity and confidentiality. Anonymity means no one, not even the researcher, can link data to individuals. Confidentiality means the researcher knows, but promises to protect identities. True anonymity is rare. Confidentiality is the realistic standard. Interesting fact: in-depth interviews almost never allow anonymity, so confidentiality is the realistic promise. Here are some examples. Scenario 1. In-class survey. A team of sociologists distributes a paper survey to 500 college students, asking about drinking behaviors on campus. No names, student IDs, or identifiable details are collected. Surveys are dropped into a locked box, and the researchers cannot link answers back to individuals. Is this anonymity or confidentiality? Answer: anonymity. The researcher does not and cannot know who gave which answers. Scenario 2. Interview study with pseudonyms. A researcher interviews undocumented workers about workplace exploitation. The interviews are audio recorded, and participants' real names are collected at the time. In the final report, the researcher replaces names with pseudonyms and strips away identifying details before publication. Is this anonymity or confidentiality? Answer: confidentiality. The researcher knows participants' identities, but keeps them private. Scenario 3. Longitudinal study with codes. Public health researchers conduct a 5-year study on mental health among adolescents. Each student is assigned a code number, and their names are kept on a secure, password-protected file linking the code to the individual. Data is reported only at group level. Is this anonymity or confidentiality? Answer: Confidentiality, because researchers can still link data back to individuals if they access the key. While these examples may appear to make sense to you, consider research online today. Is anonymity realistic in the digital age, given what you know about how computers work and data is stored? What do you think? The Ohio University Office of Research Compliance provides detailed information about what they expect in regards to informed consent on their website. Examples from the site include 1. A statement that the study involves research, an explanation of the purposes of the research, and the expected duration of the subject's participation, a description of the procedures to be followed, and identification of any procedures that are experimental. 2. A description of any reasonably foreseeable risks or discomforts to the subject. 3. A description of any benefits to the subject or to others that may reasonably be expected from the research. 4. An explanation of whom to contact for answers to pertinent questions about the research and research subjects' rights, and whom to contact in the event of a research-related injury to the subject. There are many more requirements listed on their website. It is important to note that each university has a unique set of guidelines, but these 4 parts will likely be part of any university informed consent protocol. Both graduate and undergrad students need to know about ethical procedures if they ever want to participate in public research. Research done in classes is generally not part of the IRB review process. But if you do something for a thesis, work on a professor's project, or just conduct a research project that you plan to present or use outside of the classroom, you will likely need to discuss the project with the university's IRB office. At OU, the office is called the Office of Research Compliance. I want to stress that we are all working together to ensure that our research is done in an ethical way. I speak for many of the IRB staff I have worked with by saying that IRB processing should be built into the research calendar to ensure it is processed in a timely manner. It will surely reduce stress if we put IRB processing into our research calendar to allow the IRB to fully review your project. Ultimately, we can all agree that it is important to project human subjects